but I wanted to welcome everyone into what should be a fabulous and important and critical discussion. My name is Ilya Tovbis. I'm the Artistic and Managing Director of J by J, which is a program of the Edlovich DC JCC. As I'm sure many of you know, it is an arts festival, including our Washington Jewish Film and our Washington Jewish Music Festivals. It's happening this year for obvious reasons in a bit of a different way than we normally do it. We are doing it in a hybrid fashion. So for those of you that want to enjoy online presentations, like I know many of you have of course seen this film virtually on our platform, that is an option. If you're in the DC area and feel comfortable being outdoors in a drive-in setting or in socially distanced concerts or films, we also have that option for you. And you can find out all the programs and register for more tickets on our website, which is jxjdc.org. Again, that's jxjdc.org. The festival continues through this Sunday, so do be sure to check out other programs. And if by any chance you haven't watched or all of your friends have not watched Marry Me However, which is a film, of course, we're going to be discussing today, make sure that they get on our website and do so before May the 30th. I'm going to, in a moment, introduce our moderator for the panel, and she will in turn introduce each of the panelists that you see before you. But really quick before I do that, I wanted to walk everyone through the technical aspects and the framework of how we're going to operate this discussion. So we are going to be starting off with series of moderated questions and responses from the panel and our moderator, and then we'll be opening up to audience questions. You do not, however, have to wait until the end of that period to have questions. If you have ones that are burning in your mind from the film or during the course of discussion, you can at any point populate the Q&A or chat functions, and I will explain how to do so right now. If you're in the Zoom room, you're going to use the Q&A function. For most everyone, which should be on the bottom of your screen, it says Q&A. You click on that, you enter in your question, and we will get it, and Panina will read it out. We may have more questions than we have time to get to, in which case I apologize if we're not able to get to all questions, but we'll do our best. In the event of room, there's only one option, and that is chat. And I mention this because in the Zoom room, there's chat and Q&A. Please try to use the Q&A if you're in the Zoom room, helps us out a lot. In Eventive, use chat, send the questions in that format. Again, you can start sending them in whenever, but we will be mostly handling audience questions at the end. It is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, and that is Panina Gershman. She is a longtime resident of DC, an Orthodox mother of a son who came out of the closet in the midst of his high school years. She's also a parent leader at Eshel and works to engage other Orthodox parents of LGBTQ children across the US and in Canada. In her day job, Panina works in policy, making at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, a federal agency that administers on the Children's Health Insurance Program known as CHIP and Health Insurance Portability Standards. I also wanted to mention many of you are probably here on behalf of Eshel or because Eshel reached out to you, and I want to thank them for putting together this wonderful panel, for all the work they're doing with the film. And in particular, you're going to hear from later, but to thank Rabbi Steve Greenberg, who has been tremendous helping to plan this panel, as well as his colleague, the executive director and co-founder of Eshel, Miriam Kabakov. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Panina and look forward to listening to a wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Ilya. Welcome you to the Marry Me However panel discussion, followed by a Q&A, hosted by Eshel and the Washington Jewish Film Festival. Special thanks to Ilya, who just spoke to us, Ilya Tovbis, the Film Festival Director, for coordinating this event with us. My name is Panina Gershman, and I will be your moderator today. Eshel is a national support, education, and advocacy organization for Orthodox LGBTQ Jews and their families. We've been working with a filmmaker, Rabbi Mordechai Vardi, and with Go-To Films to bring this groundbreaking documentary to North American audiences and to conduct dialogues around it within communities where its message can have the most significant impact. Today, we are joined by our panelists, the filmmaker, Rabbi Vardi, Feigie Gelstein, Matti Salzberg, Shani Braun, and Rabbi Steve Greenberg. Our panelists have both lived experiences similar to those in the film and are professionals who have worked with the Orthodox LGBTQ+ population and their families. We're going to start with Rabbi Vardi. Rabbi Mordechai Vardi is the rabbi of Kibbutz Rosh Tzurim and a director, scriptwriter, and instructor at Ma'aleh School of Television, Film, and the Arts in Jerusalem. He wrote the screenplay for the movie Halakeh, which was screened at the Jerusalem Film Festival in 2008 and broadcast on Israeli television. Vardi produced and directed the 2017 documentary titled The Field, and most recently, he produced and directed the documentary film Marry Me, However. Rabbi Vardi, can you share with us the evolution of your interest in this story? How have Israeli audiences responded to the film, and what would you like the film to accomplish?
I'll start with the last question. Really, I want to separate Judaism from homophobia. I think this is this can show a very weakness of my faith, and I think that, you know, when parents get to know that their children is not practicing Shabbos, they say, okay, I can be proud of him, and I can be, he is my son, and of course I accept him. But when a parent gets to know that his son is LGBT, many times he will be very ashamed about this fact. And of course, it influenced the young boys and girls that discover that they have this kind of same-sex attraction. So as a rabbi, it was very important for me to say in the film, Judaism must not have this this kind of looking about this issue through the glasses of homophobia. And I met people that were my students in the yeshiva and in the Ma'ale Film School. And, you know, many years ago, I showed in Ma'ale, I called rabbis to come to see films and make discussion about the films. And I remember when I brought the film, the first film about this trembling before God, so many rabbis came to see and to speak about it that we didn't have enough place in the room. And it was very unusual. And then I realized that the rabbis that did not have any opportunity to speak about it. And in this occasion, I saw that there was a big difference between rabbis who knew personally students or Talmidei Yeshiva that were gays. There were a totally different attitude about this issue from those who didn't ever knew them personally. And after many years in Ma'ale, there was a particular student that his story shocked me when I found out in his Facebook that after he got married with 2 children, he got out of the closet and stopped practicing and got divorced. And when I called him and asked to meet him, I wanted to understand what's going on after 2 children, this kind of crisis. And after we talk for some hours together, I said to him that if you're coming with me, we'll make this movie. And I really wanted, as I go deeper into this movie, I understand how important it is for both sides. Also the LGBT, that they assume that the Torah or the Judaism want from them to get married to a woman and to be heteronormative like everyone, and to overcome about their attraction. And really I wanted to show these people who went all the way with the concept of the Orthodox, you know, old way, and really after some years it blows up. So it was very important, I think, to bring this out and to show it and to feel these people that they're very highly moral people. They're very interesting people, very gentle, and to see that I would like to be a friend of every one of them. And maybe this will bring us a new attitude and to free them from this demand to get married like everyone. And after I made the film, really I heard from many people that this film made the families understand better and accept inside the family and also in the community to accept the LGBT members, especially the young ones, and to understand that you can't push them to such a situation, not only for them, but also to the response to the people there, to the men or women they are going to marry with without any attraction. And also I think that I wanted to show in the film that it is not a matter of sexuality, it's a matter of existence and a matter of identity and matter of a large space of emotions that you have to recognize and to see the reality, and maybe to make the Jewish attitude more justice, or with more justice and with more clear looking about this phenomenon.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Barty. Next, we'll hear from Matti Salzberg. Matti is a clinical social worker in private practice who specializes in the treatment of sexual and other traumas. He formerly worked in Jewish education with both adults and children. He has 4 children from his first marriage and currently lives in Maplewood, New Jersey. Matti, can you describe your experience of getting married and then coming out?
So I think, when Rabbi talks about, the stories he wanted to highlight in the film, that was my story. I came of age in the mid to late 90s. I went to a rabbinic college. And internally, I was grappling with something, but it wasn't something I could be clear with myself about what that something was. And I think that looking back, I think the thing that blocked me from grappling with, and I very much appreciate what you just said, Roberti, with identity and existence, because it is way more than sexuality, was that I could not see myself having a future doing anything other than marrying a woman and raising a family within the Orthodox community. At some point, I did go to a therapist and give a highly edited version of how I understood what I was grappling with. He was a very much Orthodox therapist. And he told me, get married, it'll be fine, don't worry, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. And so I did just that. Even while initially married to my now ex-wife, again, it wasn't something I could allow myself to grapple with. Even when I was doing things, when I was stepping out of the marriage in a certain sense, when I was doing things, it was just very, very difficult to face the reality, because again, if I came out, and I don't even think I was able to say those words to myself, if I came out, then what? In my mind, I was working in Jewish education, as Penina said. I was pretty much, a community leader. I would lose everything. For me, the distress built to a boiling point. And my ex-wife's distress built to a boiling point. I had a rabbi of mine get involved, and while I do believe he was well-meaning, and I've spoken to him since, but his entire agenda was to keep the marriage intact. He was kind of reassuring me it could work out. I could go to therapy and stay married. He was keeping my secret from my ex-wife. There was so much pain going on. But again, I could not see myself actually coming out. And for me, I didn't actually come out to end my marriage. I told my ex-wife my secret the way I saw it then, which is that I was struggling with something, that I wanted to go to therapy, I wanted to stay married. And it never dawned on me that she would have the reaction she did, which was after a few short weeks to say, no, I can't do this anymore. Now that I understand what I have been suffering with all these years, I can't stay married to you. She insisted on the divorce. And honestly, when I think about coming out, I only came out really, I went to reparative therapy post-divorce. I only came out, I would say, a year post-divorce. Was I able to accept myself for who I was? And I think what is so powerful about Rivardi's film and why obviously it resonates so much for me is that I can tell you today, over 15 years later, that I am the happiest I've ever been, that I'm the healthiest I've ever been, that I'm a complete person. But I did not see that as possible at the time. I thought my life was ending because I was out of that framework of the marriage, the community. I couldn't see a way forward for myself as an openly gay man. And it has certainly been challenging, and it still is challenging. But I think that lack of visibility for an option is what kept me in the dark for so long. And I think most important, and the part of Rivardi's film that impacts me the most, is impacting my ex-wife the most. Because the thing that doesn't get spoken about enough is how this impacts the straight spouse, so to speak, in these marriages. When therapists like the one I saw, when Rabbi like the one I had, are urging people to just stay married, toe the line, do the, so to speak, normative thing, on whose back and what is that pain going to be like for that spouse, in my case, my ex-wife, who is not experiencing desire, attraction in a way that is fundamental to marriage, and what it's like to carry that across the years, how it impacts her sense of self, her sense of self-worth, her sense of self-esteem. Now, in my case, I was keeping a secret, so it was even worse. But even if she had known, there's something fundamentally off in a relationship like this. And when I look back at the damage that was caused by, kind of being pushed down this path, I do genuinely think about my ex-wife the most, because it took me years to fully grasp what it did to her, how it impacted her, how it still impacts her. And I think what is so powerfully highlighted in Rivardi's film, and my only critique of the film is, honestly, I wish it was highlighted even more, is what it does to a spouse's sense of self to be married to someone who fundamentally lacks the ability for true intimacy and attraction and connection to them. I also know for myself that inability to see any way forward if I didn't stay in this world is what kept me in that closet. And what is so painful to me is that I know from what I see professionally, that there are still Rabbanim and still therapists telling young men or young women struggling with what they will label as same-sex attraction, get married, don't tell your future spouse. I've had people in my office sit and say, tell me just that. I've said I won't treat you under those pretenses, but that is what they're being told. I've had big name rabbis tell me to get remarried to a woman. I have family members who still can't accept that is not something I will do. And I think that until the Orthodox community is able to understand the damage that is inflicting on the spouses, and to simply allow people to recognize that is not an option. I'm a therapist. I don't know any treatment, any other modality, any person I work with. There's no treatment I'm going to say, and now we're going to test this out on another person. But that's effectively what these Rabbanim and therapists are doing. And until the Orthodox community can allow a young man like I was, 18, 19, to see another possibility for himself, this will continue. And so to me, that's what's so powerful about what Vardy is spotlighting in the film.
Thank you so much, Mati. We will now hear from Shani Braun. Shani was married for 18 years to her husband before he came out of the closet. They had 4 children together, and they continue to co-parent together amicably. Shani, can you talk about your experience of being married to a gay man? What was your relationship like before, during, and after his coming out? How did this film resonate for you?
Hi. So I guess maybe in order of your questions, if I remember correctly, for the 18 years that I was married, I had no idea that my husband was gay. We had a wonderful marriage. We were so happy, or I should say I was so happy. I can't speak for him because obviously he was struggling, but it seems like we were happy. I was very happy. I always felt like he loved me, and you know, I was happy where I was, and we were doing everything that regular married couples and families do. And when he came out to me, I was completely shocked and blindsided. I had no idea. I did not see it coming. There were no signs for me. Honestly, I wasn't looking for any signs. I wasn't looking for reasons to find fault with a great marriage. So when he came out, it wasn't even like a straightforward coming out. It was like this is what I feel, and I think this is what I need to do. But he had never acted on anything. He had never even explored that side of his sexuality or life, and he struggled very much on whether he should continue to explore that or stay married in our heteronormative marriage. And like, it was a huge struggle. And when he came out to me, he only came out to me, and I struggled because I needed help processing something that he had many years of time to process. But I was very limited as to who I could talk to and how I could process it. And it was a struggle. It was really rough. And then, of course, my biggest fear was my children. I applaud Mati for being so concerned and thoughtful and caring for his wife, and I think that's wonderful. But my struggle really was more towards my children. I always felt, I'm not going to say that it wasn't hard for me. It was really hard for me. It was devastating, in fact. But my husband at the time was struggling with his own, issues. And so he wasn't really capable of being there for the kids. And if I struggled the same way and decided to check out of being a parent as well, then who would my kids have? And they would have no one. So for me, I think now kind of, I'm answering your last question about how this film resonates with me. I think it's just really important for awareness to be out there, because dealing with struggle in general, dealing with issues in general is hard enough. But then when you start compounding it, one on top of the next, I wasn't able to process my grief of losing my marriage and my nuclear family. I wasn't able to process that for many years because I was too busy holding it together for my kids. And I'm still in therapy. It's been 10 years. I still talk about it. I have been in relationships. It hasn't affected me in that respect. I don't feel less of a woman or anything like that. But the fear of being blindsided is very much real. And the fear of getting into something and trusting someone and giving your all for such a long period of time and creating something, family, children, a home, everything. And then all of a sudden waking up one day and having it all blow up is a very real fear. And I think that that's something that I still hold on to just a little bit. I've gotten much better, but I think that that's something that I still hold on to. And I fear that my kids might have that as well. I don't know, but it wasn't easy for them. You know, one of my kids was using drugs just so he could black out and not think about what was happening to his family, because everything that he thought he knew was no longer. One of my other kids is transgender, and he also was really scared about coming out and what it would mean and how he would be accepted, because when my husband came out, we had to pick up our family and move out of state and get away from the community that we knew for fear of everything. So I think that this film is really, really important. I hope there will be more. And I hope it will, spotlight and showcase different people in different parts of these stories that are affected in different ways, so that there are all the perspectives to show how important it is to be honest with yourself, and that we only have one life to live. And why do we want to spend it being secretive and scared and hurting and in pain when we can be loving and happy and, and just accepting and healthy? I think healthy is the number one piece for me. I just, everybody should just be healthy.
Thank you so much for sharing yourself with us, Shani. We will next turn to Feigie Gelstein. Feigie was married for 2.5 years and had one child with her husband before she left both her marriage and the Hasidic community. She now works in special education and is pursuing her second master's degree at Hunter College. She has spoken and written about her experiences in the Hasidic community and about her coming out. She lives on Long Island with her partner and their 4 children. Feigie, can you tell us about your story of your marriage and then coming to realize it would not work out for you? Can you describe your relationship to your community of origin?
Hi, everyone. So my community of origin, I grew up in the Satmar, Williamsburg community, the Hasidic community. For my entire, teenage years, I was prepped to, potentially, be in an arranged marriage at 18 and get married and be a good wife and a loving mother and, with all of those ideas. And, when I think back of, the choices that I made, despite the fact that I was really struggling with my sexuality as a teenager already, I recognized that, it's not like someone put a gun to my head and said, you have to get married at 18, but those values were instilled in me from such a young age that it really was the only option. My parents were kind, loving, good people, but we all knew that this was going to happen, at 18. And so despite the fact that I was struggling internally, I, when the call came from the shadchan, from the matchmaker, that, I was gonna, I was gonna start, meeting young men from my community. And one of the young men that were suggested was a close friend of mine's brother, whom I had never met him because, we live in such separate worlds in that particular community. I decided I wanted to go ahead with it. And the reason for that was that I already knew his family. And so that was a certain level of comfort that I had around this particular person. And so I went ahead and, met him twice for an hour each, and as is customary in that world. And, 3 days later, we were engaged. And in fact, while we were still talking the second time, his mother came in at some point and said, okay, can we wrap this up? Can we have a l'chaim? And, and here I was engaged, and I was excited and anxious. I was so anxious, but there was a level of like, okay, now I get to exist like everyone else. Now I get to be normal. And, I had a 6-month engagement. During that time, it is not very customary in my world for the bride and groom to the couple to kind of see each other's before the marriage. Yet I made a conscious effort to reach out and try to get to know him a little bit. And every time I would, speak to him, I would have more and more doubts as to how this was going to work. But I pushed ahead. Because I had my engagement party, which involved signing the Tanayim in my world. And so potentially, breaking a Tanayim in that world is considered worse than breaking a marriage. And so I went ahead and I got married. And that wedding day was one of the most, one of the scariest, but also a level of hope that this was going to be it. It's going to be okay, but also terrifying. And I went ahead and I had my wedding day, and then a couple of weeks into the marriage, I knew that I was not going to be able to do this anymore. And then I, of course, found out that I was pregnant 3 months into my marriage, and at that point, I'm not going to break up a family. I'm not going to bring a child into this world with parents that live separately. I wasn't going to do that. And so I forged ahead. I kept going. I forged ahead, and I had my son, and it was a year after my wedding. And at some point, I just could not anymore. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I tried everything. I really did, but I just couldn't do it. And, I think back to the day that I had to take the step to actually physically leave for the very last time from the house that I lived in with my ex-husband. And I think that, watching the movie, and the focus that it had on the spouse. Now, my ex-husband and I were incompatible for lots of different reasons. I mean, the whole way that we, were kind of put together was, interesting and unique in its own way. But what I definitely knew was that I was, a gay woman, and, telling him I am leaving and that this is it for us, and having him stand there and beg me to stay and give it another shot and try, and we're going to make it work, and we're going to figure it out. And his rabbi said that there's no such thing as a gay woman. Every man needs a woman and every woman needs a man, and we're going to make this work. We're going to figure this out. And I said, I know, we've tried. And I want to raise my son in an environment that is full of love and joy and hope and truth and honesty. And I don't want to do this to my son, and I don't want to do this to me, and I don't want to do this to you. I didn't want to do it to him. It wasn't fair. I knew we were never going to survive this if we were going to continue trying to force something that just can't happen. And leaving, like I will never forget that moment, the guilt that I felt by breaking up our family. But I also knew that I had to. I was trying to make the best decision for everyone. I was trying to, Shani mentioned having to keep everything, make sure everyone was okay. I was trying to make sure everyone was going to end up okay. And I did. I left, I don't remember the 2 questions that you asked, but I hope that my answer encompassed some of those questions.
I think you did a great job. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Feigie. I just wanted to remind everybody that we are nearing close to the last panelist. And if you would like to ask any questions to any of the panelists, please put them in the chat. So lastly, we'll hear from Rabbi Stephen Greenberg, who is an Orthodox rabbi, educator, writer, and speaker who has led the call for LGBTQ plus inclusion in the Orthodox world. He is the author of Wrestling with God and Man, Homosexuality in the Jewish Tradition, for which he won the Koret Jewish Book Award for Philosophy and Thought in 2005. Rabbi Greenberg is the founding director of Eshel and lives with his husband and daughter in Brookline, Massachusetts. Rabbi Greenberg, where do you think the Orthodox rabbinic establishment is headed in regards to same-sex marriage? How do you think this film will change minds and hearts?
Well, firstly, I want to begin thanking Pnina. Pnina has been involved in the organization because she, among many of the parents that are involved in Eshel, just decided that that to embrace our children is really key for the Orthodox community's movement. And the rabbis basically will listen to parents in a way that they won't listen to LGBTQ folks, because parents come very much, begova einaim, and rabbis are really eager to hear the stories of parents. And I kind of applaud her and all the parents who are involved with Eshel for moving it. I just also want to say that Rabbi Vardy, this film is incredibly precious. I was involved 20 years ago in a film called Trembling Before God, that opened up our narrative and helped people admit that LGBTQ people exist. And for the past 20 years, and particularly for the past 10 that Eshel's been working, I would say Orthodox rabbis have grown accustomed to feeling responsible for compassion, for being, aware that we don't choose this and we're struggling, and to, instead of thinking of us as demonically possessed or as bad characters or people with horrible yitzrei hara that are destructive and evil, of people struggling with an issue and doing their best. But the problem, of course, is that it's insufficient, and it's insufficient really profoundly, because compassion doesn't help us build a life. I once met with a person who was the head of the RCA, and I said, do you have this challenge? And he said, yes, my heart goes out to them, Steve, but I tell them you have to be celibate for the rest of your life. So like the thought that the two options are, well, you can, force yourself to marry against your inner spiritual and religious and in your inner life, your inner desire, your desire for intimacy and compassion. You can force yourself to shut that off, or you can be celibate for the rest of your life. So here's what this film is profound about, is this film is basically saying to rabbis, you need something better to say. Rabbi, I think it was one of the rabbis in the film, Rabbi Vardy, who said, we know how to say no, but we don't know what to say yes to. And that is what this film is going to, it's going to encourage rabbis to move from compassion to a way to shape a way to speak to a 16-year-old who says, Rebbe, I know I'm gay. What does God want from me? And for the rabbi to have more to say than just be celibate for the rest of your life, or go ahead and marry a woman, or if you're a woman, go ahead and marry a man. I want to just touch on one other thought. I just want to say how precious it is to me personally, but to all of us, that the openness of heart and the vulnerability of Mati, Feigie, and Shani to be here with us, and for all the people in your film to share their stories, is really profound. And I want to just thank you all for the courage it takes to do that. When a child is born, particularly a boy, we, at the bris, and in Simchat Bat, we say something similar to Kashem shenichnas l'bris, ken yikanes l'chuppah l'torah l'maasim tovim. The moment a child is born, we're already marrying him off. And I guess my question to the community from this film would be, can we come up with ways to conceive of, because what that means is that we're already concerned for the intimacy and loving capacity and generativity of an infant. We're already thinking about that. If we're already thinking about it, let's think about it truly. And let's figure out how we speak to our LGBTQ kids and give them a trajectory for a human adult life. And however we do this, and clearly rabbis need to work through this within halachic frameworks, but the urgency of a response that's better than the ones that have been given is really on the table. And I thank Rabbi Vardi for leading us in that direction.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Greenberg, and thank you for the kind words that you said in the beginning of your part. So we're now going to turn to the Q&A portion of the call. We have several questions that came in, and I will address them to either everyone in the group or somebody who can answer it, what I think it might be the best. So Rabbi Vardi, were there characters in or stories left out of the film that couldn't be included for whatever reason that you wish could have made it in?
Try it again. I didn't call the.
Okay, I apologize. Were there characters or stories left out of the film that couldn't be included for whatever reason that you wish could have made it in?
No. All the people that I asked them and talked with them, they agreed. There were some who said that they are still married with women, but they didn't want to participate in the film. And so I couldn't just understand their stories. But really, it wasn't easy because the parents didn't want to participate in the film. Of all the characters, I wanted to bring them to speak with their parents, and I couldn't do it because there's a big problem. Because every LGBT that go out, it brings out all the surrounding family, and it was very, very sensitive. But really, I could convince them that I want to bring out their voice, so they have to help me. And you know, the characters that could bring out these stories strongly, they went with me.
Okay, thank you. The next question, and this would really be addressed either to the whole panel or Mati and Feigie, maybe Shani. Can some of the panelists comment on gender differences? How do men and women experience this situation differently? Does anyone want to jump in?
If the man jumps in first, I fear we're perpetuating gender stereotypes. I think I can only speak from my experience. I think that, you know, what Shani said really resonated in terms of how she felt she had to keep the family together while everyone was going through this. I think that that's certainly the case. I've met many people on a similar journey to mine, and I think that particularly for parents, men, for better or worse, seem to have more space to process, I think, than women do. They're more able to maybe compartmentalize. This is the parenting self, this is the self. I also think, you know, in my experience, the level of prohibition for male homosexuality is just in terms of the basis in the Torah. You know, there's an explicit verse prohibiting male homosexual acts. There isn't an explicit verse prohibiting female sexual acts. And I know even growing up in a pretty, you know, right-wing Orthodox community, there was, even within that community, there was an ability to acknowledge kind of experimentation between girls in a way that was not able to be acknowledged between boys. You know, those are just some of my thoughts and kind of the differences there.
Okay. Does anyone have any other thoughts on the question?
I can speak for, you know, my experiences. So in terms of, you know, it's funny because I talk about this sometimes with my, you know, male gay friends, and you know, and some of them are like, you know, if I would to be, you know, because I was, you know, 16, and, kind of exploring a little bit within my community, which is very fascinating to a lot of people. But, as women, we are also taught to be a little bit more affectionate with our peers, as opposed to, with men. I think that what my friends testify to in their world is that they don't have the space to explore or experiment, because they're like, it's like very, very, very frowned upon, at least in my friend's experience. For me, I was able to explore, although, I felt like also in my world was this idea that, like, nobody talks about sexuality, but there's such a hypersexual, it's almost like as if everything is so hypersexualized, but nobody talks about sexuality. So, I was, we were in summer camp and I was taking pictures with who I look back now and I'm like, she was probably my first, crush or girlfriend or whatever, and I was taking pictures, just, very innocently taking pictures, taking photos of us, kind of with an arm around her and whatever, which could have been a picture with any other friend. And someone found those pictures and kind of gave me a speech where, she said, we don't, that's like a little too affectionate, and, and could be she saw something more or whatever, but, it's I feel like the damage of that, where you don't talk about sexuality, but you hypersexualize every loving, intimate action so much, is very damaging, and can last for like years. This confusion between, like, is this considered, sexual, or, or is this purely like me just being affectionate with my friends, So that's very confusing, especially when we're talking about a world that's so divided, right, between genders, where I had no contact with boys. I was not allowed to talk to boys ever. And I was around girls all the time. So, a regular friendly friendship, where are the lines? You don't know, because, you don't talk about sexuality, but you hypersexualize. So I think that that was my experience as a woman in that world. I think that coming out of that world, I had a responsibility to hold it together, because it was understood that I was gonna, we are taught that we are responsible for our children as mothers in a motherly capacity, which is full time. And so, I had to process and grow up at the same time that I was raising my child. And I still continue to do so. He knows that there are certain things that I don't know. And, like, for years, we would talk about the fact that, like, I grew up in a very restrictive world and I don't know a lot of things. And he would help teach me things, my little one. And that's because, I was literally, learning about the world in the same ways that he, as he was growing older. And so I think that, the fact is that we are taught to be that primary caregiver, and we're not allowed to fall apart in that way. Or at least it's not maybe explicit, but it's like implied that, like, that's the role that you take on. So yeah.
Thanks, Feigie. Our next question is for Rabbi Greenberg. What would you, if you were in the rabbi's shoes, tell that student who has same-sex attraction about what his options are, beyond celibacy or marrying the opposite sex while remaining an Orthodox or halachic Jew?
So I had this exact conversation, and I said to the rabbi, he is Shmuel Golden, is his name, and he was a rabbi in New Jersey. And I said, well, let's role play. I'll be a 16-year-old. My name is Gabe. Rabbi, I know I'm gay and I don't know what God wants from me. What would you say? And he said nothing. And I said, well, would you say what you just told me, which is, riffing off you have to be celibate the rest of your life. You will never be touched. You will never be held. You will never dance with someone you love. You'll never be comforted. and held by someone when you are sad or mourning. You will never make love to a human being for the rest of your life because something's wrong with you. And he said to me, well, I wouldn't put it that way. And I said, well, Rabbi, how would you put it? He said, I don't know. Steve, how would you put it? So this is what I said to him. Gabe, I too don't know why a loving God makes gay people and gives them an impossible life. So look, if you can be celibate for the rest of your life without doing great harm to yourself, I understand, but I doubt that's the case. So I think you should keep the mitzvot that you can, and you should find a partner, and you should live a life of love and companionship and join my shul. That's what I think. I think you should keep the mitzvot you can. And I said, could you say that? And he said, I think I could. I said, well, let me push you one more step. I said, could you say to Gabe, I'm 40 years older than you. I'll probably be in Shamayim before you go to heaven, and offer your justification for why you kept 612 mitzvot. You couldn't do it. When you make that argument, know this, I will be behind you, cheering you on. And Rabbi Golden began to cry. I think the goal here is to get rabbis to own the pain and suffering that this reality causes us, and for it to be theirs too. For them to suffer with the circumstance that the halakha now creates for us, in order to begin to help us together find a way to respond. And so that's my answer is, Imo nochi v'tzara. I too don't know why this should be, and I'm going to figure out with my colleagues a way to imagine a halachic world in which you can find love and companionship.
Thank you, Rabbi Greenberg. How about this question? For those of you who have found themselves not able to be part of the Jewish community because of this issue, how can allies, community leaders, educators, parents, and the community help make people who are LGBTQ+ feel more included and accepted, or at least find a place somewhere in Judaism? If anyone wants to jump in.
I can jump in.
Go ahead.
So, my relationship to Judaism is very complicated and complex, and there's a lot to talk about on that. But I think from a purely, from a place as a parent, I know that I did not want my son to grow up in an environment that is very much pitted against my life, my lifestyle, as they put it. And, I know that the stories that I've heard about people trying to, put their kids into Orthodox institutions, in Orthodox schools, shuls, having to lie about, who they are as a family, having to keep secrets, having to, leave out information, whatever it is. I would not want to put my son through that, where he thinks that there's something wrong with his family structure. My son walked into school the first day of first grade, and they gave him a tour, and he walked into the nurse's office and he said, I have two moms, double the fun, double the love. My kid can do that. I made that happen for him. If I, was wanting, why can't that happen in an Orthodox setting? There's something fundamentally wrong with not letting a child walk into the room and not be able to express what his family structure looks like, that his family structure is a little bit different. So I think purely from that perspective, as a parent, the way that I think that this can open up for people, where people want to stay in the religious community and still want to live their true self, is to create more acceptance and understanding and communication and conversation around this topic, so that it's not so taboo, so that we don't have to leave out information, so that we could talk about certain things.
Okay, thank you, Feigie. Shani, I think you had something to say.
I did. I love what Feigie had to say. I think that was really, really cool. I think it's interesting because I don't think people realize, you know, and this is not about me at all, but just another perspective. I think that, I think what people don't realize is that it affects us too. When I say us, I mean the people who are not in the LGBTQ world. And I know for me specifically, it affected me greatly. My family is highly Orthodox, black hat, yeshivish, very, very from, I went to Beis Yaakov and seminary in Israel and everything. I lived, you know, just shy of the Hasidic life. I also went to all girls schools and all girls camps and all that stuff. I did all of that. And today I'm not nearly as connected as I was. But I do believe that Judaism is a huge part of my life. And it has been a huge part of shaping the person that I am today. And I don't know if this is going to sound elementary, but something that I think about a lot is, you know, if somebody were sick, they would not come to me for healthcare because I am not a doctor. And so when there is an issue like this, to go to anyone, a rabbi, a teacher, a grown-up, somebody who has no experience, and then to hear that person say, you are wrong for feeling whatever you're feeling, whether you are LGBTQ or not, or you support it or not, to say you're wrong for ABCD and you must do ABCD. I find that bizarre. It's interesting to me. And I really wish that instead of focusing on what's negative about, you know, or what people find to be negative about this whole world, piggybacking on what Feigie said, I wish we could be positive, you know, like where she was saying about how her son can go to school and say, hey, I have two moms and double the love. I think that's awesome. You know, why can't we focus on the positive? And like what Rabbi Greenberg was saying, to find somebody to love and to care for and to give and receive, that, you know, and build healthy humans. I wish there was more of that, more focus on the positive side. And again, I don't want to sound callous or anything, but none of us are God, and we can't decide what's right and wrong. And I feel like, you know, that's something that whoever is struggling with whatever in terms of religion, that is something that they are going to have to take up. Because I have plenty of things that I struggle with in terms of Judaism, will have to take up with God one day. And that's our business. And as humans, as equal humans, because you are like me and I am like you, and we all breathe the same air and pump the same blood and have the same, you know, bleed the same from the same cuts and everything, that we should support and love and, you know, communicate that so that people are whole and healthy instead of hurting and dying.
I think that was a great answer, Shani, and Feigie also really thank you. And I think that Shani's answer about being positive is really a great place to stop. I apologize if there were any questions we didn't get to, but we're running out of time. Thank you all so much for participating. And I thank all of the speakers for sharing so personally and from the heart. Rabbi Vardi, Matti Salzberg, Shani Braun, Steve Greenberg, and Feigie Gelstein. Thank you, Rabbi Vardi, for making this incredible film. If you would like to bring this documentary film and a similar panel discussion to your community, please be in touch with Rabbi Greenberg at steve@eshel, ESHEL, online.org. And I just want to tell everybody or remind those who already knew that Eshel has support groups and resources for LGBTQ people, their parents, and their families at www.ashelonline.org. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Panita.
much. Thank you.